Join me in the blanket fort as we venture into the realm of the unknown. This is Painted Haint. Hello and welcome to Painted Haint, the Halloween special, one of the Halloween special episodes. Today I'm dressed up as one of the Hammer horror girlies. I have this nightgown, I have this wig, and so I thought, yeah, let's do Hammer horror. Like, I have expect Christopher Lee to pull up in a few minutes. But anyways, as promised in the preview, I am going to tell y'all some stories coming out of my family's old funeral home up in Gary, Indiana. So here we go. So, first story. This actually kind of was more like a realization that's happened recently. It actually happened last weekend. So me and my dad were talking about his grandmother on his mother's side. And he was saying it was a conversation about ancestry and that kind of thing. Anyways, he started saying he remembered her, right, from when he was a child. He said a baby. And I said, well, you must have been a year old or something. And he was like, he said, yeah, he might have been. But then he said he remembered speaking to her, right? So I was like, somebody that don't sound right. So we get on Ancestry, look at our family tree, and we find her. We look at her birthday, and then we look at her death date. So this woman passed away on July 25th, 1954. My dad was born in December of that year, so he would have been 6 months old. And so I said, there's no way you talk to that woman. First of all, because you were 6 months. And 6-month-olds, they do they do speak and babble and stuff like that. But see, the other key to the story is he said that he had walked. He remembered walking into the funeral home, or at least the part where they live, because the way this place was set up is the funeral home was on the first floor. The second floor is where my family stayed, as far as my grandparents and my dad, and later on his two sisters. So he's like, yeah, I spoke to her. He said she used to sit up at the top of the stairs. This was her thing. She would sit up at the top of the stairs in this chair, and that was just her spot. I guess at certain parts of the day, and it was normally when he got home from school. So I'm like, Dad, I don't want to break it to him. I'm like, yo, you saw a ghost. And he's like, he's like stunned. Because I saw it in his eyes when he looked at the birth, or the death date. I was like, yo, you saw a ghost. Yeah, And he goes on to say she was always there. And even his cousin had confirmed to him that, there's no way you would have remembered her. And he was like, okay, well, how does she look? And he said she had long black hair and she was real fair skinned. And he was like, yep, that was her. And he was like, yeah, that was her. But back to my dad's reaction. Yeah, my dad, poor thing, he can't get no paler. But I could tell you, he went white as a sheet. He was like, so I've been seeing a ghost all them years. I've been telling people I knew my grandmother. And he said they would speak to each other. He would come in from school, say, hi, Grandma, and he would say hi. Or she would say hi, and then he would go on and, go eat a sandwich or something. So yeah, I guess she was the sort of guardian angel over the funeral home. Now the next story once again involves my dad. I think my dad sees spirits, but he just doesn't kind of acknowledge it in a way. As he's gotten older, he has sort of acknowledged it to a degree. But anyway, so in this story, he was outside playing And he said that he was just, outside doing this thing, doing what little boys do in the late 50s, early 60s. And he says that a man came out of the funeral home, and he thought, oh, it must be like a customer or somebody who was, there to view a body or something like that. But he said he didn't remember any funerals happening that day, because otherwise he'd have to be quiet or be somewhere else. So anyways, this man, like I said, comes out and grabs him like on the shoulders, and he's partly thinking, this is somebody that my family must know, my parents must know, or I don't know. Either way, he said that he ran. He just like took off. And he said he didn't know why it was his instinct to just like jet up out there. And when he turned around after he had run like down the block, there was nobody there. And he said it was almost like nobody had been there. And I said, well, what was he wearing? Because I was curious. What was he wearing? And he said he on a black suit. He remembered he on a black suit. And he thought it was weird because the man wasn't wearing a hat. And so he was like, he wasn't wearing a hat. Like, what? And Norm back then, that was a thing. Like, you wore a hat, right? And I was like, maybe he was a patron, as in somebody that the family had, taken care of, to be buried later on. So that's another story that happened to my dad. This last one happened to a relative of ours. So, God, this is terrifying. Like, I feel like this is more terrifying than the ghost. So, they would often play hide and seek. So you might know where this is going. So oftentimes they would play hide and seek in the showroom, which is something they really weren't supposed to do. Actually, wait, no, we got two stories. So let's get comfortable. Let me get comfortable. So, the kids in the family would often play hide and seek, right, in the showroom. And one of the cousins got the brilliant idea to climb into, you guessed it, one of the coffins. Homie went full vampire, just hopped on in there. And the coffin lid shut. And the kids, like, including my dad, and them were like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know. I guess the 1950s equivalent of like WTF, G Willikers. I don't know. I don't watch Leave It to Beaver, but they freaked out because they were trying to open it. And my dad told me the story. He was like, it was jammed, right? Now, spiritual me is thinking the spirit's trying to teach your ass a lesson. Like, stop playing in the showroom, which is something that my great uncle who owned the funeral home was like adamant about, because it just looks kind of ghetto. I won't say ghetto, but it looks kind of dangerous or not dangerous. It looks bad. Also, it's dangerous to be just like playing hide and go seek around some damn coffins. These are some morbid ass kids. This is probably why I'm the way I am. It's generational. So anyways, back to the kid stuck in the coffin. So this kid is like screaming, crying, like he's in the words of Ron Burgundy, he's in a glass case of emotion, right? And so my dad is like, we gotta go tell the adults. Meanwhile, my other relatives who were kids at the time, older relatives now, were like, hell no. Like, getting my ass beat. But he was like, no, we gotta go tell one of the adults. And so one of them begrudgingly goes and tells one of the adults. More than likely, it would have been my grandmother. She may have been at the up in the apartment, which was again above the funeral home at that time. But when they got back, the lid had opened, and the other kids said that they didn't open it. They didn't, because it was they had tried. It was too heavy. So grandma and them got the boy out, the child out, and he was shooketh. Like, I don't even think she gave him a talking to, because that's the lesson right there. Like that's it, But they swore, like they were like, no, we couldn't open the lid. It like opened. They said it opened on its own. Like I said, as though somebody was like, stop fucking around. So, needless to say, they played outside from then on. Probably even on rainy days, they was out there playing stickball or whatever, whatever they did. They did play stickball, and we were roller skating and bicycling and all that. But now the last story, once again, involves my dad. My dad was a curious cat. I don't know what his two younger sisters were doing. Like, well, one was a baby, but my dad was a straight up curious cat, because this boy was getting into all of the things. So one day, I guess he was bored, and so he said he went looking around, and he was like, part of it was he was looking for somebody, looking for one of the adults, but also he was like, oh, never toured a funeral home. So he starts lurking, and he, finds this stairwell. And so he goes down the stairwell thinking, oh, it's just going to be like a regular basement. No, ma'am. He said what he remembered was all these drains in the floor. And there was this big metal table in the middle of the room. And he said the room was ice cold. And he said, because he was so young, he couldn't exactly like but he couldn't exactly clock what exactly this place was. Or rather, he knew what it was, but he just didn't exactly know the name. But he knew he shouldn't be in there. Homie found the embalming room. Pretty much. He found the embalming room. And he said my dad is so awkward. He said he just stood there and he was just like, he was literally that meme of Homer Simpson going back into that bush. Like, that was him. Like, he just slid on back out of there and went back upstairs. And I think he probably might have been looking for like one of my grandparents. And they were like, what you doing, boy? And he was like, nothing. Like, he just went right outside and went to go find some friends to play with. I mean, let me think about it. Wouldn't you be shook? You a whole child and you saw that? An embalming room, complete with the tools and everything. And I mean, he was aware, I'm sure, to a degree, that he lived in a funeral home. But, as a child, you probably aren't thinking about the fact that, like, how bodies are prepared and like where they go and all that, that kind of thing. So, yeah, my dad had quite this is early childhood. This is straight up early childhood. Can you imagine? Listen, I like spooky stuff. Obviously, I'm doing this channel. Look in my room. Like, I'm into Halloween. But that right there, that's crazy. Like, that's insane. I mean, to grow up your early years in a funeral home. And like, I mean, my grandmother, because these were her relatives, it didn't quite bother her. Now, my other grandmother on my mom's side, on the other hand, no ma'am. She had a friend who worked in a funeral home, and she said she would wait on the porch for her to get off work sis sitting there 5 hours in the hot Georgia sun or the sometimes cold Georgia winter, waiting on her friends to get off work because she was like, I ain't going in there. But on the other hand, you have my people from up north who were like, yeah, it's just death. It's a family business, that kind of thing. But yeah, that funeral home, they ended up selling it after a true crime event, actually. I might do a video on that since I want to focus solely on like the creepy weird shit that happened there. That story's crazy. And I actually found the articles from a place in Australia, of all places. I think it was at Sydney. They had reported about what happened in Indiana, thousands upon thousands of miles away. But yeah. So the moral of this story is, don't play around in no funeral home. And to borrow from the people of Appalachia, if you saw it, no you didn't. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this video. And happy Halloween. Bye.